Hi, Alec. I'm delighted to be here. Thank you so much for inviting me along.
Yeah, and I'm delighted too as I look out on this miserable wet day. So it's like a ray of light to me. Thank you very much to keep it going.
I'll do my best.
Great stuff. As you know, my show usually starts with people in their last year of school. Where were you? Were you the academic, or were you going to bum off around the world to see what it was all about?
You know, it's what a great question. I mean, at that time, I didn't really have a clue. I'd had a challenging few years in my sort of midway through high school. I came out of the closet. That was a really challenging time, and personally, and for my family and for people around me, and so I just sort of found myself going into my GCSE exams, thinking, well, what sort of appeals to me, and I had kind of some natural talents for foreign language. I was particularly strong in German and French, and German seemed to be my favorite, really. And I thought maybe I'll be a German teacher. And that's kind of, I don't know where that came from. I don't actually know what I was thinking, but anyway, that's kind of how I felt. I just thought, well, I'm strong in this area. Seems like fun. Perhaps that's what I'll do. So that's kind of where I was at the end.
Where did this sort of love for languages come from? Because I think most of us struggle with just basic English, and here you are off with two other languages on top of it.
Well, it's interesting, actually, given I'm talking to you, Alec, because my mother's family were from Northern Ireland, and
Right.
and as a youngster, my grandfather would insist on me doing the Irish accent. He said, "Come on, Jackie, do the Irish accent," and so I would do my best, and it would crease him up laughing. So it would really tickle him, and. And I realized from years really with him of that experience, not enough years, sadly, but years of that experience, I realized that actually I had a flair certainly for accents, and perhaps just at that early age, I've never really thought about it until you've asked me the question, actually, but maybe at that age I realized that okay, maybe there's something to it, and I just felt that I had a way of, I suppose, assimilating,
Right.
whether that be an accent or the words in a foreign language. And I still to this day, I'm passionate about, as much as possible whenever I travel, to pick up at least a few bits of the language. I think many of us do. It's
Yes, of course, yeah.
so, it's also, it's fun. There's not as interesting as people, as it were. So yeah, maybe that's where it came from. Maybe it's my
So you've moved away from the stereotype of if somebody in a country abroad doesn't understand you, shouting at them in the same language.
Yeah,
It doesn't seem to work.
No, it doesn't. Funnily enough, it doesn't, does it, often? But yeah, so I do my best.
Yeah, excellent. So what then? Okay, you were thinking of maybe being a German teacher, but that wasn't to be. You got distracted then.
I did rather, yeah, absolutely. So I after I took my GCSEs, I thought, well, I'll continue on with A level, German, French, and psychology, which just interested me, and I've always been fascinated by people and what makes people tick. But the school I was at was several miles from my home, a Catholic school that I travelled on the school bus to, and unfortunately, they didn't have the facility to be able to teach all of those topics at the school. So it meant that, for psychology lessons, for instance, I had to travel to another school to take that on. And to be honest with you, I just thought, to hell with this. It's just not working out. I'm not really enjoying it. Loads of my friends had already left school. You know how it is.
Yeah.
So I thought, well, I'll go closer to home and I'll go to college. And so I decided, again, maybe the love of language led me to this, but to enroll in a BTEC course on travel and tourism.
Right. Okay.
And alongside that, I was able to pursue what were called the London Chamber of Commerce exams in French and German. I've never heard of them before or since, but anyway, I got some qualifications in those as well.
Excellent.
And the travel and tourism course was a lot of fun, and I met some really nice people, but actually it was more geared to if you want to be a travel agent or, work in the travel industry. And I thought, well, I don't really want to do that. I want to be a German teacher. So now what am I going to do? And I was there, I think I stayed there probably about a year. And as we do, I had a I had part-time jobs as I was
Right.
sort of supporting myself through college, as it were. And one of those, I worked at a chip shop,
Oh,
and
right.
another one, I was actually the youngest cleaner they'd ever seen, working at my local Sainsbury's superstore. And every morning I would bike down to the Sainsbury's superstore, and I would, scrub floors and do what was needed. And then my dad, bless him, would pick him up in his van and chuck my bike in the back, take me home. I'd get ready and go to college. And that's how it went. And and there goes my dog. Sorry about that.
No, you're fine.
So he just likes to get in on the act, but he'll calm down in a bit. So yeah, basically what happened was I got quite known. I was quite known in the superstore by the Sainsbury's staff, by being such a young person doing a cleaning job, kind of bucking the trend a little bit. And so I started to realise that, travel and tourism BTEC course wasn't for me, and, where would I go next? It's that whole, I think we spend often quite a long time trying to find ourselves, don't we?
Yeah, certainly do.
And I built some relationships with some of the staff in Sainsbury's. I'm really sorry about this, Alec.
Yeah.
Okay, I have to try and calm him down a little bit. So I built some relationships up with some of the staff at Sainsbury's, and so I thought, you know what, I'll get a job at Sainsbury's.
Well, okay, as you do, yeah. Okay.
And that's what I did, yeah. And I think that gave me a really great introduction to, totally kind of monitoring my own money and earning my own money full time, but also, to people and relationships and so on. So I'd never dreamed of working at Sainsbury's, but it was a really good introduction to the world of work. And but this whole kind of German, whatever was still there in my mind. And it was a funny story, actually, because I saw an advert for a German freight forwarding company advertised in my local paper. And I thought, oh, I'll write to them. And I did. And when I look back, I think, God, it must have been so funny to receive this letter. I'm pretty sure I probably put something like, hi, my name's Jackie, I speak German, can I work for your company?
And they probably thought, an English person speaking German, that we have to meet them.
Exactly, yeah. And so they recruited me, long story short. But the hilarious part is that they actually had me working on the Italian desk. So after all that, never got to use the German anyway. But so I spent probably about the next 3-ish years working in freight forwarding, and that was fascinating too. Of course, dealing with people from different cultures.
Yes. So obviously, how was your Italian these days, or were you able to pick up any of that?
No, nothing at all. I mean, I have to say, they did speak very good English, thankfully. So no, nothing at all.
It's amazing how people get picked up for a particular job, and then having a core skill, they're put into something where the core skill isn't of any use.
I know. Yeah. Oh, well, it's hysterical, really. But yeah, I enjoyed my time there.
So you had the travel bug anyway.
And I did have the travel bug, yeah. And so it wasn't going away, so I then decided that I was in my early 20s, and I thought, well, if I'm going to travel, I might as well do that now. So I got a job as a holiday rep, something very, very different, but wonderful job that gave me the opportunity to travel and see some far-flung places. I went to the Maldives and Sri Lanka, as well as, Portugal and Greece and so on. And but one of the things I think with repping is it really isn't easy. It's a hard sell, right? So you're selling trips, you're selling car hire, you're always on call, as it were. We had to wear, polyester dresses in 35-degree heat, no fun. And I think the other thing is, we used to joke that, the tourists would have their brains and their manners removed on the outbound flight, and they wouldn't be replaced until the inbound flight. So, we got everything in between. People sort of change personality when they go on holiday.
Yeah. And that's a challenge, actually, managing people like that.
Oh, definitely. And especially when you're so young, I mean, I was in my early 20s, and, I would have considered myself reasonably worldly wise. But I suppose at the time I would have thought I was very worldly wise, and then you realise afterwards you weren't worldly wise at all. But but yeah, it is challenging, and it's hard not to take some of the attacks personally. You know, when people are complaining, I remember getting pinned up, literally pinned up a wall once because somebody hadn't got a plug in their sink. I kid you not, I kid you not. You know,
Yeah.
and obviously, you know, there's obviously layering of pressure and stuff that goes onto somebody, but you know, people would take out amazingly small things on you as the rep. You know.
But it's a testament to your own strength of personality that you're able to manage this. I mean, at the time, it's obviously quite shocking, but on reflection, it's how your personality gets built up over the years. Hopefully, you haven't carried the scars forward, which.
I hope not. I hope not. I mean, you know, it really does give you a whole insight, and it's very much a character strengthening role, actually. You know, just to get out and travel and meet people of different cultures is great as well. But you know, the life experience that you do have.
Mm,
You know, I had somebody die on my coach,
wow.
you know, and that was in the first year I repped. And, you know, you have to deal with that, and no element of training can help you deal with that. So you just sort of do the best you can. And I think I'd always been I'd been brought up by parents who were self-employed market traders. I'd always had a work ethic.
Sure.
And I think that served me well in some of those challenging times, and indeed some that have come since.
Yeah, no, fantastic. Okay, people dying and all. Wow, there's
Um,
challenges for you. So
yeah.
let's move on to happier places.
Yes, let's. Yeah, well, I kind of did about 4.5 years as a holiday rep. I realized that, you know, actually I was quite good with people and I could sell, but I didn't know what all of that meant, and what that was going to mean. And I remember I was probably about 25, and I got back home one year and my mum and dad said, right, you know, I think it's about time you settled down and got a house, because that was the days where young people could buy houses, right? And
Right.
so I thought, well, what now? What am I going to do? You know, and so I thought, well, I'll go and ask a job agency. They might be able to help. So I walked into a recruitment agency, and I just said to them, hi, you know, basically I can sell and I'm good with people. Have you got any jobs that would suit me? And they offered me a job as a recruitment consultant with them. And sort of 15 years later, you know, I just sort of fell into that recruitment world.
Wow.
And so many of my former recruitment colleagues did similar sort of falling in unintentionally.
But it's
Uh,
a tough world to be in.
it is a tough world. Yeah. I mean, I tend to say there are two industries that tend to be first to know when there's an upturn or a downturn in the economy. One of those is a state agency and the other is recruitment.
Yeah.
So, you know, I kind of weathered the whole 2007, 2008 economic crash that was challenging, and you know, and just kind of weathered that storm. And I was a good recruiter. I was promoted to a management role, which I realized I wasn't very good at. And until I started to put into practice some of the great training that I'd received. I worked for the Global Recruiter Read, and for 12 and a half of the 15 years in recruitment. And they really did deliver some first class training. So I put that into practice and actually became a very, very successful manager running million pound operations and so forth. And I remember, I think it was 2009, I was chosen as a top performer to go off and on a 5-day trip to Austria, where we would go on expeditions, and we would build bridges out of sticks, and we would hang off cliffs and sleep in caves and all that, and find ourselves. You know, it was like I'm never really quite sure in hindsight whether it was a reward or not, but anyway, it meant that I, together with about 11 colleagues, went off to Austria, and we did just that. We hung off cliffs and scared ourselves silly, and I found myself
Wow.
unintentionally again. I found myself, and I realized that, you know, I wanted to go into learning and development. I wanted to explore this whole giving back. I think during the 2007, 2008 crisis, my role as a manager had to become more of a coach, more of a motivator. And I realized actually that I got a lot of pleasure from helping others become their best selves.
All right. Very good.
And so I first said it out loud shortly after coming back off that trip, and I decided to go off to college.
Again. Again,
Yeah, I
back to
know,
college.
I
Yeah.
know, I know. I thought it's in the back of education, but actually, yeah, I went off to college again. I did a CIPD certificate in personnel practice course for a year. That was in HR and learning and development. And then in November of 2010, I moved into the learning and development team at Reed, and I began delivering sales training and recruitment training to new starters. It was a role that, despite being the new girl all over, I thrived in very, very quickly. And I think I'd really found a place where maybe purpose was coming through.
Right.
I had been a successful manager eventually. So I was invited to move into management development, and I did so just about a year after joining the learning and development team. And about a year after that, I became the head of management development, looking after the strategy and training for around 350 directors and managers globally. And all alongside that, I had somehow ignited my love for learning. And I'd gone off and trained as an NLP practitioner, master practitioner, and subsequently trainer. And I do think it's so interesting, Alec,
Yeah.
these chance meetings that you have and the things that come together. And there was a lady on that course, she's from Sweden, and, we're still in touch now. And we were talking about, what we did for a living and so on. And I was telling her, that I was in learning and development for a recruitment company. And she said, is it your business? And I said, no. She said, you don't run your own business. I said, no. She said, why not?
Right.
And, just at that moment, those two small words kind of made me think, yeah, why not? And I think for the first time ever in my life, I realized that, although years of living with self-employed parents and seeing the challenges and the struggles that can be faced, I actually thought for the first time, maybe I could do it. Maybe I could run my own business.
Right.
Long story short, I'd say probably a few months later, I decided to leave Reed.
Right.
After all that time, was a big step, and start my own consultancy. And that the consultancy is Runway Global Limited. My intention was to help people accelerate their performance. All those metaphors that come with airline runways and so on. And I ended up becoming very successful in that very soon, very quickly.
Right.
And I think by leveraging the power of my network, I had a good name in recruitment, and many of my early clients were recruitment companies.
Sure.
And then I'll keep going.
Well, no, I suppose I wanted to ask you, I mean, the decision to go off and run your own business in particular, it takes a lot of courage, because you're often stepping into the abyss, not knowing how you're going to survive, no financial guarantees. How did you cope with that sort of challenge?
Yeah, it's interesting, isn't it? I mean, without sounding too cheesy about this, because it's clearly not quite this simple, but a lot of people think about, oh, what's the worst that can happen? What's the worst that can happen? And I also try and think about what the best is that can happen.
Sure.
And not from a sort of head in the clouds perspective, but I try and find a balance. And I've always been like this, really. And so I thought, well, what is the worst that can happen? I thought the worst that can happen is nobody wants to work with me. Nobody wants to do business with me. So then what would I do? So if the business just didn't work, what would I do? And I thought, well, I'll go back into learning and development elsewhere.
Yes.
But what if nobody wants to hire me? So what would I do then? And I thought, well, come on, girl, you've got a 15-year career in recruitment. You could be a recruitment consultant.
Right.
And so there was always that sort of contingency backup if needs be. And then, of course, I flipped the coin and said, well, what's the best that can happen? Maybe I can find a work-life balance. Maybe I can earn more money than I've earned in my corporate life. Maybe I can feel freer.
Yes, of course.
To impact. And actually, the main purpose of me starting the business, funnily enough, was not a financial one, but it was about the impact that I could make in making a difference to more people across the world. And I think the fact that I always had that in the forefront of my mind, as opposed to, I mean, girls got to make a living, but it wasn't
Yes,
about,
of course.
I'm starting this business to make money. It's I'm starting this business to make a difference to more people than I could ever make in my corporate world.
And you had a passion for this. And I always find this fascinating, that people eventually find their passion.
I just think it's incredible. You know, in talking of kind of, I don't know, affirmations or putting law of attraction things out there, you know, I'm a bit of a fan of that, to be honest. And, you know, the thing I really wanted, I kind of put out there, well, I'd love to work globally. You know, I'd called my business Runway Global for a reason.
Yeah.
And in the first year of operations, I went out and delivered training in 7 countries around the world. And, and and I often say, I don't know how that happened, but maybe I do. You know, it's interesting when you put things out there, and of course you take the relevant action. You can't just sit back and hope that the universe works its magic.
No, but you also kind of managed to incorporate your love for travel as well. So you now,
Yeah.
not alone are you delivering something that you're really passionate about, but you're able to incorporate your own travel and love for travel, plus also
I know.
making a difference to the world. Wow, it's all tying in very nicely.
It is. And, you know, here's the thing, you know, this from a, I think I'll be a German teacher to, well, actually now I am, I suppose, in a fashion, a teacher, you know, a trainer, a corporate trainer for adult learning. And as you say, I travel as well. So it's incredible, really. And sometimes I think, wow, I wonder if my younger self knew somewhere along the line where it was going. Who knows? But yeah, so I've been in learning and development now through my own company for nearly 7 years, coming up to 7 years.
Wow.
And I was delivering sort of sales training and leadership training and so forth. And then 3 years ago, I got introduced to the Professional Speaking Association, who, of course, we're both a part of, Alec. And
Yes.
and in there, I started professionally speaking. So I started speaking about actually my own journey. My
Right.
own journey from having been excluded and bullied for my differences to becoming included and valued for my contribution, and the whole host of things in between that led to took me through on that journey. And I did a TEDx talk on the
All right.
subject. It was one of those, oh yeah, I'll have a go at that type thing. And
Why
I
not?
did.
Yeah.
I know. And that seems to have been a bit of another life-changing moment, because people now started to recognize me as somebody that could talk about diversity and inclusion at the very time in the world where diversity and inclusion was becoming more of an important topic on organizational agendas. And so in a nutshell, this whole story leads us to the point at which I find myself now, where I work with organizations to, as you said in your very kind introduction, to embed inclusive working practices into their organizational strategy. So I'm able to bring in my recruitment expertise,
Right.
my leadership knowledge, and my personal journey and corporate knowledge now that has developed further on diversity and inclusion to really help them make a difference. And that's what I do now. And I just think it's, again, another fascinating thing that all those different components that went before have brought me to exactly where I needed to be right now.
Yes, isn't it funny how journeys are? For our audience out there, where can people find out more about you, Jackie?
Sure. Well, I do a lot on LinkedIn. So,
Yes.
you know, Jackie Handy, you'll find me on there on LinkedIn. I also have a website, of course, which is jackiehandy.com. And if you click on the shop link as well, you can see a little bit about my little book that I compiled this year, which is called The Little Book of Belonging, and helps encourage people to take small steps towards an inclusive world. I do have a YouTube channel also of my name, and of course, the regular sort of social media channels. And if anybody listening is interested, but perhaps unsure of where to start with their inclusion journey, I also run a Facebook group, which is called The Power of I. And that's a safe space to come in and ask questions and share information about the subject.
And what are the key challenges you're seeing today? And I mean, I'm sure they must have been amplified somewhat by COVID. What are the key challenges you're seeing for organizations today in the particular area that you're working in?
Yeah, so there's that. You're right, amplified by COVID, most definitely. I think, you know, there's been a couple of things that have I think perhaps brought diversity and inclusion in various forms onto organisational agendas this year, or rather 2020. The first in May being the George Floyd killing over in the US, which I think brought the Black Lives Matter movement and the plight really of our Black and minority ethnic groups onto the radar, the mainstream radar once again. And also, of course, the COVID pandemic, which has had a hugely adverse effect on the mental health and well-being of so many people. So those couple of things, I think, have certainly brought heightened awareness. The challenges, I think, is when organizations look to become more inclusive, they don't always know where to start.
Right.
Now, there's a little bit of more of heightened knowledge around perhaps where to start now, although I can help people work that out. But it's now there's now the added bonus, or sorry, the added challenge of most people are working remotely.
Right.
So the leaders really do have to think about the ways in which they're expanding and communicating with their people much more frequently, but not necessarily only on a business level, but actually really getting under the skin of that human being as to what's going on in their world for them right now. Because there is that cliche, you can't pour from an empty cup or whatever.
Yes, of course, yeah.
Your own mouth first and all those kinds of things. But, there is truth in that. And if your people are not in a personally good place, for want of a better word, and there's a whole host of reasons they may not be right now, then they're not going to be able to perform well for your organization. So, I think that categorically, the first main priority from any business leader right now is the health and well-being of their staff members, their workforce, because get that right and it will pay dividends, not just now, but way into the future. We remember these experiences. Get it wrong, we'll also remember them. And, ignore it at your peril, if you like, would be my message there.
Yeah, and still you'll find organizations who don't fully appreciate the value here, who just do this as a box ticking exercise.
Yeah, absolutely. I think a lot of people talk about hiring diverse staff, for instance, and, bringing more diversity into the workplace. But then they don't know what to do with that diversity once they attract them. And so when I talk to people, of course, diversity and inclusion tends to be grouped in that order, but actually I tend to work with people to focus on inclusion first, because if you get that, the inclusive practices right, if you are successfully able to create an environment where everybody feels like they have a valued contribution and a place they belong as authentically themselves, that in turn will ripple out. We know how communications ripple out into brand and so forth, so that then diversity will come in, or increased diversity will be attracted into your workplace anyway as a consequence. It's the nice consequence of it. So no, I think it's absolutely the wrong thing to do, to just sort of bring that tokenism, if you like, to say, oh, we're diverse, because we're all diverse. We've all got differences. It's about making sure that everyone feels as though they belong, they have a place. And if I may say, and you'll know this as the business expert, but the reward that is reaped from really focusing on good working environments founded on belonging and value is that the workforce will become naturally more creative and innovative when you've got diverse brains, thinking about problem solving or strategy or whatever. They are much more creative and innovative, and that is well documented, than homogenous teams. So I really think it's the way to go for business.